Great. Welcome everyone to our panel discussion today. My name is Dr. Tiffany White and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Before we get started, I do want to say at any point during this panel discussion, if you have any questions or comments that you would like us to address, please put it in the chat box. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to give each of our presenters an opportunity to introduce themselves. And if you would, please express your preferred pronoun. We can go ahead and get started with Steve.
I am Steve Seiko. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I work for Department of Behavioral Health, Fresno County Children's Outpatient, and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
Thank you so much, Steve. We'll go ahead and go with Henry next.
Hi, my name is Henry Mraz. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in the Central Valley, and I am the owner of a group practice for mental health services. It's called Safe and Affirmative Counseling.
Thank you, Henry. And last but not least, we have Lisa.
My name is Lisa Anderson Beasley, and I am a CASA advocate for Fresno and Madera counties, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm so excited to hear more. So the purpose of this panel discussion today is really just about intersectionality within the LGBT community. And so we're just going to go ahead and get started with some of the questions that we have. And we really want this to be informative. We really want this to be relaxed. So if anything comes up during any of our discussions, feel free to bring it up. Again, for our audience who are listening today, if you have any questions or if you have any comments, please feel free to put it in the chat. We have someone who's monitoring that and we'll include it in the panel. So our first question is, and again, in no particular order, if you want to answer it, feel free. Can you tell us about your perception of diversity within the LGBT community and how it might impact someone's behavioral health?
I guess I'll go first. I think that diversity is, I guess within the LGBT community is such a big part of it, I think. I think, being a part of the LGBT community is kind of one part of us, but then there's so many other aspects to us as a person as well, and so working with clients in behavioral health sometimes, we oftentimes will focus on maybe they're gay or lesbian or trans, but there could be a lot of other things that are going on that have to do with some of the other diverse parts of who they are as a person, and so sometimes, working with the LGBT community can be, a lot of work because you have lots of different layers of things that are going on with such a multifaceted, diverse experience that each individual is having, whether it be like the religious upbringing or like race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic, all those different things kind of all play a role in that person's experience. So diversity is just being queer or LGBTQIA is diverse, but then there's so much diversity within that as well. So it's like, I call it like subcultures or and it kind of goes down into like different things too, so there's even diversity within being like, for example, being a trans man or a trans woman or a gay man. There's so many different things within that as well that kind of creates even more diversity. So there's a lot of different things clinically that we have to kind of be aware of and think to ask, and also be very mindful of as well and respectful as much as possible.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think, the term intersectionality has been it's a big term. And it's something that, is just becoming more widely used because like Henry said, I mean, you're not just one thing, right? There's so many things that impact your life, your culture, you said your ethnicity, what religion you come up, where you live, the home you're raised in. I mean, there's so much that impacts the community, just like anybody else's life. So there are layers of complexity that are just built into it. And often I think when you deal with someone of the LGBTQ community, folks hone in on that. And so I think it's our job to help folks see like, no, we're not just that. We're also husbands and wives and daughters and mothers and stepmothers and you name it. So, not everybody's just one thing.
Yeah, I think you guys hit it on the nail, that we have all of the same intersectionalities that everybody has, but then you add to that the LGBTQ plus issues, and then you add those and you combine those with all the issues that everybody else is dealing with, and it kind of magnifies it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would also, add on to what Steve said, and also the messaging that's out there about the LGBTQ community, especially right now with all the anti-trans legislation going on all over the country. So that is a layer that we do deal with in this community, is the messaging, and not only what it does to, the adults in the community, and kind of, but also our younger folks out there. And how they are highly, highly impacted from that messaging. I used to do some volunteer work for the LGBTQ hotline in San Francisco, and we'd field calls from all over the world, but mostly all over the nation. And just, we get calls from folks in the middle of the country who were just struggling because of the messaging that they're hearing and the laws, which are just have such adverse impacts on people and their lives. So to keep in mind.
And when I hear that, I kind of think about, if someone's coming to my office, somebody reaches out, like, how can we best support them, knowing there's, with all these intersectionalities and different layers, different, how do we provide affirmative, how do we provide, these this care that's going to be really mindful, not, just trying our best to not, hurt anybody even if it's like a microaggression or something, trying to be mindful of that, so it's tough sometimes to be like a truly affirming therapist for each client, because they each have their own unique thing,
Yeah, and I think that's why we're having this discussion, because I don't think that there's so many opportunities to talk about it, right? And so I think that just like touching on what Lisa, you had expressed, and that I'm thinking back to our last training that we had, and just for everyone watching, I just have to plug that if you want to watch that, the last panel discussion that we had that was focused on youth and how all of these messaging impacts them. You can go to the DBH, the Department of Behavioral Health website, the YouTube, and the Facebook, it will be there. But in the last panel discussion that we had, Dr. Beasley and April Taylor-Salary had discussed how, parents who are attempting to be supportive might say something like, you can be out and open with me, but I don't want you to do that outside because it may or may not be safe. And what messages did you just tell them, right? That's a microaggression. You just told them that you can't be your genuine self everywhere because of one reason or another, right? And so you said one thing, attempting to be supportive, but our attempts at being supportive are not always, intent doesn't always equal impact, right? With some of the messaging that we have. And then we have the things that aren't microaggressions, like macroaggressions, where we have the legal things that come up. But one of the things that we talk about in behavioral health all the time is a whole person approach. And what that is just being mindful, like Henry, you had expressed, being mindful of all of the identities that one person might have. And then teaching someone to do that is so complicated, because it's just, how do you adapt to all of the needs that a person might have? I'll say, speaking for myself, like my salient identity, it has changed throughout my life, right? And so at different points in my life and going through different things, it's been difficult to navigate, like, which identity comes first right now, or which one is the one that I feel most salient with. And so as clinicians, it's something that we have to navigate and figure out ways that we can best support the people that we're serving. But I think that the most important thing with the whole person approach is allowing the person who you're working with to lead that and to provide you with guidance on where they want to go. But I'm really interested in learning more about, Henry, what you had expressed about being affirming and mindful of all of the identities. How do we honor a person's identities, all of the identities that they have?
I know for me, that's a big thing, because I started this group practice where I wanted to, have therapists be affirming and be mindful and of all these things. But, it's hard to get a 100% gauge that this person's going to be able to do that, And so for me, it was like, how can I properly train these therapists and staff to really be able to learn, how to do that, how to be in that space and to provide that kind of care. And so for me, it's just a lot of training, a lot of consultation. We meet, we talk, if I hear something, I'll be very, when you explain this that way, it sounds a little bit like a mind, so I kind of would let them know they're kind of like not even aware that, kind of like that mom you were saying earlier, who's like trying to help their kid is actually, hurting them in some indirect way. And so it's just constant consultation, constant education. And we put a high value at my practice on individuals with lived experience. So trying to work with other therapists, other doctors who do our work, but also have that lived experience because they can kind of put it together. And so a lot of the clients that we work with at my practice are gender diverse, gender expansive, transgender, non-binary. And so, I want to make sure that I can best understand that experience as much as possible, but I'm not, transgender. So it's kind of like, I need somebody else to kind of give me, a better glimpse than just a 2-hour training online. That's why I think lived experience and consultation with somebody who does what I do, but also has lived that life as well, which is different for everybody, but still to get a little bit of a more better idea of that has been, I think, the best investment for my practice and for serving the LGBT community. Yeah.
And I think, Henry, you hit the nail on the head with the consultation, talking with other clinicians, whether the other clinician is actively involved with the LGBTQ plus community. Talking with somebody to get their opinion is huge because there's a fine line with confrontation and being affirming, because sometimes what you say when you're being confrontive may come across as being microaggressive to them, when you're not trying to be microaggressive. You're just trying to say, are you being real here? And sometimes you have to kind of be a little more, I'm not trying to put you down or doubt what you're saying or anything, but is this a possibility? It can be a fine line, because especially with the clientele that I work with, which tend to be the transgender population, they've been so a whole lot of microaggression and macroaggression that they're very sensitive to anything that even hints of that. And so having other people to pass things by back and forth is really helpful. And again, you're right, you're not going to get that in a 2-hour training.
I did want to leave space, Lisa, if you did want to add something to that.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm not a clinician, but I just have some, real life, we all have real life experience,
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we're all in tune with microaggressions, right? I mean, the look, the dismissive language. And, I know as an advocate with youth, I often tell people, I'm like, when in doubt about something, you got to ask somebody, how do you want to be addressed? What are your pronouns? Because, at times it might not be offensive to ask, because, you'd rather get it right from the beginning than say, oh, whatever you are. I mean, we've all been in that predicament, like, oh, well, this is my, my wife. Oh, whatever that is. Okay. And so, just language, the way we dismiss people, that has a huge impact. And so it's just being aware and asking questions, because you're right. I mean, we identify on so many different levels one day, and, there are days I'm not in my, my gay head. I'm like, I've got other concerns today. So I'm showing up maybe, today as a very concerned coworker needing to get a team project done. And, and then someone makes, they make a flippant comment about something. And then you're like, now I'm back into that head in that space. And I'm like, wait, that kind of offended me. But yeah, I just think when in doubt, ask how people want to be addressed.
Thank you for that. I definitely think that is, it seems so simple, right? But I think that it's something that we always can benefit from. And it's not just that is really the whole person approach that we should be practicing with all of the people that we work with. And like, I think that one of the things that I've learned and I struggle with, because even just like with critical race theory, we talk about all the times about being in systems that are created for certain people, right? And we're not even always aware of it because we grew up in it, we live in it, we were taught and raised in it. But there's so much gendered language. There's so much language that we can be using, the messages again. So figuring out how to use language that is inclusive to everyone all the time, right? Not just when I'm working with individuals, but all the time. You never know who's listening to you or what messages that you may be having in a conversation at work, and I think that one of the things, and I have to give a quick kudos to Steve, has provided me with a lot of books. I don't know, Steve, if you're comfortable with sharing those. We can even just do that after the panel discussion and just put it. But I had a lot of assumptions and just not being mindful about, the intersections between, sometimes religion and the LGBT community. And I had to reflect on like, what are my assumptions that I have about those things, because I didn't put those things together. And so just always being aware and being open to learning. And I think that humility is a huge part of all of this work, anytime that we're discussing any kind of equity work.
And I think you also have to give yourself some grace too, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff, you're in your mind and you don't want to be offensive, saying like, well, how should your pronouns, right? And I think a lot of that just because we don't want to be offensive. So, here's the thing, give yourself some grace too. Take that breath and then ask the question, because, nobody gets it right all the time. So just be a little humble, and we're all in this together, this kind of human approach. And often for CASA, I've done some LGBTQ panels for folks training to become CASAs. And the majority of people I'm speaking to are not in the community. Some of the trainees. And is it helpful to have experience within the community? Yes. But we were talking about this a little bit earlier before we started live. But a lot of it is just connecting on a human level, which is emotion. So I often ask, okay, how many of you have been sad? How many of you have been in love? How many of you have had your heart broken? How many of you have felt depression? And I think if you can answer yes to those questions, then you're already connected to the person you're interacting with. And and you don't always have to be belonging to the same community, because emotions, I think, are pretty, they serve everybody. So, and not to dismiss, being in the community or everything, but I just think that there's just a deep need for human connection. So where you can connect, do.
I love that the non-clinician is telling us some of the most clinical basis, right? Like, if you can't empathize with the experience, try to empathize with the emotion at the end of the day, right? Super valuable. I do want, sorry, Steve, please go.
No, go ahead.
I did just kind of want to dig a little bit deeper and discussing one of the concerns that we have, I know, is that we don't want to expose our LGBT communities to potential harm when they're seeking any kind of services, not just clinical services, but like as soon as they're coming in the access stage, we don't want there to be a receptionist who, was handed an LGBT flag and put it on just because their boss handed it to them and felt pressured, right? And so might potentially have some microaggressions before they even get to therapy. And so I wanted to see if you had any recommendations for everyone who's involved, just to be more inclusive and affirming.
I would again recommend like training, yeah, because there are a lot of people and a lot of really LGBT specific places for trainings and things like that from people who have been doing this for a long time and working and like trying to create more inclusive spaces, you know. But I know at my practice, I'm really strict about those kind of things with staff. It's almost like a zero tolerance for it, you know. So I have to see all the emails for a while that you're sending to anybody who's new, you know, to make sure that you actually, you know, after the training, because for me, like, I don't want clients to have to worry about that when they come here, you know? And I know not everybody has that same level of expectation, but I do. And so, and I know none of us are perfect either, but I really do not like slip ups. I know they're human and we'll, you know, allow them that space to be like, you know, self-compassion and all, but then it's like, but don't do it again, you know, kind of a thing, you know? And so my staff in the bar is super high with me, you know? And so, and it's just constant training, constant consulting. And I just watched a lot of stuff at first, you know, and then once someone kind of, I feel like they got the flow, you know, they're asking the right questions. They seem to be working from a very, you know, affirming approach, you know, they understand like about legal name and, you know, and asking somebody for like their name. And, you know, when we're talking to someone, only use their gender. Don't ever bring up their, you know, what their assigned sex at birth was. It's completely irrelevant. There's no point in doing that, you know? And so it's like just helping them learn, like, you know, just some of those things that if you're not around people a lot that are gender diverse or gender expansive, you might not realize that that's kind of how that's how conversation is, you know? It's like always saying, you know, the word transgender all the time. You know, it's like they're just a man, you know, and so it's kind of helping them understand like it's actually quite simple, you know, once you take away all those labels that we focus on a lot, you know, and so that's my thing, just like training and maybe micromanaging for a while. I don't know if that's healthy, but that's my approach. Yeah.
Well, and I know the county does a lot of training. And I know I've heard grumblings because people feel like that we have so many trainings on this that it kind of feels that it's being shoved down their throats. And I get it, because it's got to get old, you know. And so before pre-pandemic, when I was in the office, I would spend more time getting to know the people in the front, the AIs and that kind of stuff. And it was more of a person to person, hey, you know, how you doing? And getting to know them, answering questions. Hey, is there anything I can help you with? And just being a person to putting a person to what we're dealing with and making it more human, not just this paper thing that we're having, so that it's more personal and makes them much more responsive to why they're doing this. Because, oh, this is a person, I get this. And sharing experiences, how much it means to my clients and why how this makes their mental health better and how they feel more accepted and their depression is less. They come in, they feel like this is a safe place. And my clients then also follow through with, hey, thank you, it means a lot to me, that kind of thing. So having the one-on-one, unfortunately with the county, we do, because of medication services, we have to put their legal names on their paperwork because we can't do prescriptions any other way. It's the way our system is done. But there is a way to let them know that we're kind of stuck with that. And we're working on workarounds so that we can make sure we call them by what name they prefer, you know, that kind of thing. And we're working on, we've got to fix those. But the county is aware of these issues, but we try to let them know this has nothing to do with you. We're not trying to put you down. This is a state thing. This is a county thing. You know, we're still working with the insurance companies and that kind of stuff. And we're on your side. We're advocating for you and trying to let them know. But having more than just sending them off to this training that the county mandates and making them more personal, I think is much more helpful than just, this is what we have to do and this is why. Makes it more more palatable.
And just to add, I'm no longer a county employee, so I feel comfortable saying this. The reason that the county has so many trainings on this specific topic is because there's a disparity. And so
Yes.
if there's an obvious need for it. And so we are trying to, or the county is trying to create an affirming environment or work towards bridging some of those gaps. You know, we've had burned bridges. And so we're trying to repair and create an environment where we don't have to worry about exposing people to potential harm when they come in and seek services, right? So sorry, I had to throw that in there a little bit.
No, and I get that. And because I've seen some of it myself, and I just pick my battles and educate the people that are willing to be educated, and those that are not worth my time.
There's that. Yeah. You know, I don't work for the county, but I represent one person as a CASA advocate. And so my responsibility to my person is to make sure they are represented in front of social workers, in front of the judge. So yes, personalizing it, letting them know who this person is, calling them by the name they choose, listening. A lot of it is listening. Listen to your client and how they talk about themselves, and mirror that. But I know for me, when I'm standing in front of a judge or having conversations, I'm never slipped once using the assigned named at birth compared to where we are now, because that does a disservice to my kid, and also tells people that they can do the same. So that is something I really, really stress, is just listen to how someone is speaking about themselves and mirror that. Because flip it around. We don't want someone to, like we were talking about microaggressions and macroaggressions, we're all very well aware of that. And so sometimes the slip of, the name assigned at birth is an aggressive move, or maybe sometimes they just don't know. So that's where it's incumbent upon us to correct it and, advocate for our people. And, staff, I don't have any staff, but, let them know too, like, just think about it if you're on the other receiving end of it. So.
Absolutely. And for those of our audience that are watching, if you have more questions about how to interrupt some of those microaggressions, if you go to dbhequity.org, there are resources there. We have a Raven tool that tells you how to disrupt microaggressions. And so I do want to follow up. Lisa, you had a perfect segue into our next question. And what recommendations would we have for our LGBTQ folks watching and who are interested in services?
I guess I'm not 100% sure. I guess in terms, can you be more specific, perhaps?
Sure. Just what recommendations would you have, and if they're seeking services, do you have any recommendations for how they can go about finding a care provider who would be appropriate for them?
I think it's just research, right? I know for me, generally, I'm looking for folks who are going to be open to the LGBTQ community. Word of mouth too. That is a big deal. Like, oh yeah, this person is, they're very open to hearing things, and I'm going to say it, I'm much more wary of perhaps recommending a religious therapy service to someone in the LGBTQ community. And maybe that's my own, and I'll say it, personal bias, but it's something I tend to look out for. Like, what's the background of this person? So it's just, and and talking through with your person, at least as far as me, what are the needs? What are you seeking? So I can help identify those resources that are uniquely fit for your person.
Yeah. I know a lot of clients, we've had some clients, I wouldn't say a lot, we've had some clients who come to us, who had kind of a negative experience, a lot of microaggressions continually throughout sessions, from people who are like on Psychology Today, who put that they're, LGBT, friendly, or they see, gay, lesbian, and so we get a lot of those clients that come to us, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so much different here, like it seems so much more like I can just go to therapy and not have to worry about all those little things, and so I guess my answer is it's hard for them to find care. And that's why I didn't know how to answer your question, because it is difficult, especially in Central Valley. And so usually I refer clients to like more inclusive places, like a therapy den is a great like alternative to Psychology Today. Therapists can put more like the kind of work they've done, or like, it considers other factors, and it's much more specific about things like, maybe like kink, or like someone who's like a vegan, or somebody who might have religious trauma, or someone who wants like a Black therapist. So it's much more specific, and I usually refer clients like therapy den versus like go to your insurance, because they're not going to have a list for that, or go to Psychology Today because everybody puts that at their, But I think that what Lisa's saying is good too. Like read through more, there might be little red flags of things that might be triggering for your story. Like if they do faith-based counseling, for example, that might be a red flag for you, So just reading a little bit more into the person, but it is hard, I do spend a lot of time just referring clients places, even if we can't see them, because I don't want them to go somewhere and be like hurt, or have these situations. So we spend a lot of time just finding appropriate referrals for people here in the Central Valley. Yeah.
Well, and asking a whole lot of questions when you are trying to ferret out who might be the right therapist, asking a lot of questions. One of the things that I work with in helping the LGBTQ plus community is I work with, believe it or not, conservative Christians that are trying to find therapists that are faith-based, that believe that it is not a sin to be LGBTQ. And they are out there, very few, but they're out there because it's not. And, first thing I do is I give them my reading list, so that helps them so that they can articulate better why they know it's not. And then when they talk with a therapist that's faith-based, then they can articulate, and they'll know if the therapist is straight up or not. But because you've got to, if you know what you're looking for, you have to have enough of your own knowledge to know that if those are red flags or not, or you just kind of, well, is that me or is that them? No, if you've got enough knowledge of what you're looking for, then you can find the right therapist.
And I also think it comes down to, it's the chicken or the egg, what came first, chicken or the egg kind of thing. And like I said, I'm not a therapist. I haven't been through education, but I would think more supports on the psychosocial education from the very get-go, and then looking at your changing demographics out there. How do you meet the needs of your community? And we all know that demographics are shifting, especially with with the new generations, the millennials and the Gen Zers, and the I generation. I mean, these are going to be needs coming up. So I think social services needs to either catch up with that part, and understand that things are going to change. So, maybe perhaps we also need to include other educations and trainings to prepare us for that very forthcoming future, which is really on our doorstep now. And so it's preparation all around.
And also, I want to add one thing, I guess, is to put pressure on those providers who are out there, who are affirming and do have a lot of good experience and training to kind of meet the community where it's at, which is like, accepting Medi-Cal and more insurance panels and not just wanting to, do cash only, and putting more pressure on the community already because, there's a big financial, yeah, I'll just end it there. Yeah, that people can just be mindful of their community and how can I meet them instead of like becoming a financial burden for them,
That's key. I know with, being a CASA advocate, you're talking about people on Medi-Cal. And it's like, oh, go to the Medi-Cal, just, go to that list. And you're like,
yeah, good luck.
So yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, opening up, if you are a provider that is friendly to the community, open it up because, I mean, there's a need out there. And, there's so many things that can be remedied if we just go to the root of the problem. We're just treating symptoms all the way around. So, if you can be one of those people to treat the root, open it up.
I feel like we can have a whole panel discussion on the ways that insurance creates barriers as far as equity is concerned, right? Especially when it comes to access and care. And like we're talking right now about like waving a magic wand and getting the care provider that you want. But in reality, it's not always like that, right? You have a list of people that you can see. Out of those, 3 or 4 are going to be able to see you. So, I mean, there's definitely, from the perspective of a structural point, there's so many ways that we can improve.
That are not able to take Medi-Cal because it's considered a conflict of interest. And how many of those people are trained and are affirming? Cannot do that. So I'm just saying this is another intersectionality type of issue within the workforce that poses a problem with our LGBTQ community.
Yeah, no. Barriers are exactly that. Barriers.
Exactly, another barrier.
So.
And not even saying how complicated is this if you're dealing with an underlying mental illness. Like if you've decided that, you know what, I'm really depressed and I really need to seek help, but then I have to navigate all of needs met and I have no idea like how to navigate all of these things. And so one of the things that we even recommend is just finding support, It doesn't have to be a clinical person, just finding your tribe, and so that's why we do. Henry, we have recommended people start with your agency, just again, finding somewhere that you can find support. There's support groups, going to the Fresno EOC LGBT Center. We have the pop-up, the name is like, I'm the source. That is now working with Fresno County and just finding support systems so that you don't have to navigate all of those barriers alone. Finding someone who can help you navigate that, just because that can be overwhelming and prevent you from getting the care that you need. And you deserve to get the care that you need. And that is not a you problem, that is a structural problem. And so if someone can help you find those things, I think it would be beneficial to reach out and ask for that help.
Agreed.
Sorry, I got off my soapbox real quick. We do have a question that from our chat boxes from Juan. Juan asks, what do you provide to those who you serve regarding available resources for education and support groups?
I think for me, a lot of times, here in Central Valley, I guess that's one cool thing now, is that telehealth is much more normalized, because I've been using it for years before people were like, I don't know how I feel about that, but now they're much more open to it, like due to COVID and everything. So oftentimes have clients look for groups and resources, sometimes in other places. They can also feel much more anonymous and safe, and some of them that are support groups can be out of California. It's just to kind of meet people and have a support. It's not a therapy group, But locally, I refer a lot of clients now to the LGBT Resource Center through Fresno EOC, Fresno Spectrum, the Source, kind of everything you just mentioned, but also, just trying to, and I connect a lot with LGBT affirming therapists all over the country as well. So I'm a part of some bigger network groups to kind of ask people like, hey, I have a client who wants to go to like this, who wants a transmasculine group, who has one, and somebody like Seattle will have one, or somebody in like DC, you know, so it's kind of like networking to better gather resources for our clients because they are rather limited in our immediate area.
Right. Thank you.
And I do the same thing. And because several of the clients that I work with outside of the county are in positions that they don't want to be within the groups here in town because of confidentiality type of thing. And so I'll refer them to places outside of the state, and it works really well for them.
It has opened up our world a little bit more. So you are now communicating a lot more through this medium, and that seems to kind of break down some of the barriers here and there. But it seems to be there's more access because, I know speaking for some of the folks in CASA, you're also dealing with social anxieties or anything like that. So, any place that is safe for them, whether it be the Zoom medium where they're not in a room with a bunch of people and have to interact, that's a real thing too. So, there's a lot of things to consider. But yeah, I guess if there's, anything coming out of COVID is that I don't think we're going to regress into a more closed door culture where now we've just kind of blown the doors off a bit, and like you can have people meetings in New York, in California, it's just figuring out the time of day.
Yeah, I like that. That's not, we're looking at the positives that came out of the pandemic, because there has certainly been some negatives, and particularly for the LGBT community, we know that a lot of the problems that existed before were just exacerbated by the pandemic. And so I know that just having some of these support groups via telehealth has been something that has been amazing. You can find your tribe in New York, you can find your tribe in Seattle, and just people who understand what you're going through. But on the other end, it's making sure that the people who are working with these groups know, like, hey, they may not have a confidential environment. So like just being aware of how telehealth has those subtle nuances of, you also have to be mindful of their environment and making sure that they're safe still. And so side note, Henry, or anyone, any of my panelists, do you do trainings for community members on things like that to consider as far as telehealth?
In regards to what? Trainings for like how to use telehealth?
Or even just like things to be mindful as far as providing services to the LGBT community?
I would like to. I have before, but since living in Fresno, it's been like lightning speed of growth. So I've been focusing more on training my staff and colleagues of mine who I trust, who I know are really affirming. But that's the next step. So soon, okay. Yeah, 2022 goals.
Got it. Love it. All right. We do have another question from our chat box from Mazzy. Mazzy says, my 10-year-old daughter is taking on a role against straight, in quotes, and other similar groups. What is your opinion of a child delving into the negatives of personal identity? Do you feel this intensifies any feelings of rejection, or would you find the strengths in confidence and pride?
I think that's a pretty, I know that was a pretty hot topic about a couple months ago, right? The whole straight stuff started coming out and things like that more and more all over social media. I would say it depends on where they're looking. I know like if they're on Reddit and things like that, it's much more of like a, liberal space at times, and it's easy to find a lot more like-minded people, but it could be a little dangerous, to go down some of those avenues. But I think it depends on where the person's at individually, and how they feel about themselves. But yeah, I guess my answer is that it really all just depends on the person themselves. Some clients I'd be like, oh yeah, go there, like challenge that. And something like, that might be a little problematic for you, It really depends. Yeah.
Yeah, a big part I would look at is how long are they in the negative? Is that a constant state? We don't want to be a constant negative. It's one thing, we all have things that we look at and we just kind of focus on that for a little bit. We're negative, but for the majority of the time, we're positive. It's not a big deal. So to have a part of it's not a big deal. But if it's a constant thing or it gets worse, it gets progressive, then that's probably not healthy.
I think that's a big piece about like social media and people being young nowadays. Not how when I was young, I went from school and like nobody could bother me, and now like there's Snapchat, Instagram, never ends for young people, and so it's just constant stuff. And if it's negative, it's like, it's hard to leave that negative space that Steve was talking about sometimes. So I think that could be a whole other training in social media and the LGBT community in youth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I know with, my CASA, we have conversations about social media a lot and what type of chats they're having and, what they're being faced with, and how to handle that negativity coming off, because, I'm like, some people just want to argue just to argue. So, it's okay to just be like, I'm done, because you don't need to prove anything about yourself. People are just out there to kind of throw some grenades your way. So, we have conversations about feeling safe around social media. Not everybody gets to hear your story. And, I'll credit Brene Brown for that, right? Like, people got to earn your trust to hear your story. So, and social media sometimes isn't the place for that, because your story is so personal and vulnerable. So just be aware of some of the places that you're stepping into and what you do want to share about yourself.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing on social media is you don't know who you're talking to. Are you talking to another 10-year-old or are you talking to a 20-year-old that's feeding this? So you have to be careful with social media.
I think that the media literacy thing is something that needs to be taught. It's something that we absolutely have to discuss. Like, I've had adults, it's not just something that, it's like, I've had adults who it's just like, we got to talk about protecting your peace, right? And what that means is turning off the news sometimes. If you're constantly getting these negative messages and it's just like, I want to be informed, but also I'm depressed after I watch it, right? So just like figuring out what that line is for you and protecting your peace. And yeah. I think that particularly with the last year and all of the race community and the pandemic in general, it's been difficult for people to stay, like, the world is rapidly changing and I want to be informed, but also like, I'm tired, I'm impacted by it, and so figuring out how much you can handle is definitely a skill that we have to figure out for ourselves.
And I think the question said that the child was 10. I mean, at 10, I'm 46 and I still have some issues figuring out what people's intentions are.
Yeah.
So at 10, I learned more about what's going on and what these kids are being confronted with. And, if we can have the conversations with them is when to stop. And, because at 10, you're taking all the incoming. There's no way to kind of sift through some of reasonings and, our littles to sift through.
Yeah, that's actually, I appreciate that recommendation a lot, in that just being mindful of what your child is consuming, I guess, in social media, just because it's difficult for adults to do. So just maybe even just supporting and guiding your child through like what kinds of pros and cons there are to be mindful of. And I know that that's something that I've done in therapy in the past, is just like, how do we know like what is a good friend, or how do we know like what a person, when we know a person has our intentions in mind? And so it's never a cut and dry answer. It's really just figuring out, what that looks like and what messages that we've had in the past. And so definitely appreciate those recommendations. what might be some of the diverse needs of LGBTQ communities?
I mean, I think it kind of comes back to, I think, the first question around the intersectionality thing, of, you know, learning difficulties, or, you know, a disability, or, you know, other cultural sensitivities, within their own homes, depending on what culture, their requirements for people to come out, or honoring the fact that some people don't want to come out, and being able to honor that. So, I mean, there's a lot of, there's just a lot in the community as Acosta, and some of the big government structures are very difficult to navigate. And, you know, we've talked about it. They're set up sometimes just to be difficult, and that can cause a lot of people to go, I'm out that way.
I would say some, I guess, for resources, I guess to access for diversity, I would recommend more, or what I would like to see is more access to healthcare providers, being like medical services. So access to hormone therapy, surgeons in the area that do take insurances, that do take Medi-Cal. We have like one physician who's like super overloaded with a lot of the, you know, hormone therapy interventions in the Central Valley. We need more providers that are willing to learn that part as well, you know, rather physician providers, not like mental health providers. And also therapists who are open to writing letters for clients to receive affirming surgeries or care or medical interventions for their transitions, and more of those services in the Central Valley. It seems to be very slim. I'm writing letters like every week for people, and there's like sometimes hard for me to find somebody else to write like a second letter for them, you know? And so, which is crazy because there's like tons of therapists here, you know? And so there's definitely a need for more of that, like just access to care. Yeah. And also just like fun stuff, like supportive services, you know, like, I don't know, social events, you know, pride and bringing people together, like, or just fun stuff, you know, just to celebrate and not be hiding as much as we hide in Central Valley, you know, like we're in our safe, like queer bubble with our friends and stuff, but like just having more stuff out and about. That's what I would like to see. Of course, post-COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. We kind of took a hit with COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. A big hit. Yeah.
Well, and then we have the added issue with our trans population that are homeless.
Yeah.
They can't go to your typical shelters. They don't fit. So we don't have places for them for the most part. It's very hard to find what little bit we have is full. And so we don't have the resources if they're homeless. And we get a lot of kids that when they come out, they get kicked out, you know, and they're older, you know, they may be high teens or young or like college age, and where do they go? And they don't fit, and they're of course then vulnerable to attack and to physical violence, and so we can't keep them safe, and they're on the streets, and so we have a lot of needs.
So what I'm hearing from all of you is that the needs are very diverse, and it's really important to connect with the person that you're talking with about what their diverse needs may be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking too of just following up with what Steve had just said, and the disparities and inequities that exist because our system wasn't created for diverse groups, and how our kiddos from the LGBT community, who they are more likely to be involved in the justice system and foster care system just because of who they are, right? And so just being aware of those inequities, and I hate that I have to say this, but I have to say it, not asking members of the community to do your education for you. Do that education on your own, right? They are not responsible for providing you your education, but there are tons of resources out there for you to do that education on your own. We will be providing some resources. There are some resources already on the DBH Equity website, but if there's ever a need for resources, education, if you're interested in learning more. I think that the biggest takeaway from this panel that I've gotten so far is ask for it, right? We want to make sure that you are comfortable. We have a little bit over 30 minutes left. I do want to go to a question that we do have in our chat box. It says, I think my friend who identifies as within the LGBT community is struggling with their identity and mental health. What can I do as a friend? And would they need to come out to their parents to see a therapist, or are there other options?
Listen to them, be their ear, coming out to your friend and understanding what their environment at home is like. Sometimes it takes some work on yourself before you come out, to be in a more in that kind of bubble of, I just needed to be good with me before I made this announcement, because I know, that there I might face a barrage of stuff coming at me. But as a friend, just listen, hug them, assure them that they matter, and that, what they're feeling is normal. And I think we normalize what people are feeling. Then you create more connection with them.
I would also go with the don't have to come out yet.
Yeah.
You don't want to add fuel to the fire at this point, because if you've got someone who's already struggling and having wanting to have someone to talk to, you don't want to add further stress to that. I would find a therapist that you can trust, that can be supportive, and then work on the possibility of coming out if it's going to be safe and in a safe environment when you do that.
I guess I would just agree with what Lisa and Steve said. Just be a friend. Listen, be there. Be supportive, and they'll go on that journey. And if, as a friend, I'm sure they'll take you along and tell you all about it. But as long as you're there to listen and be supportive along the way, then you're being a great friend. But definitely not outing them would be a good first start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let them take that journey on their own. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has a right to their own coming out. That's really, really important, because that can be absolutely traumatizing if your coming out is not on your time. That's your absolute right to have your time with that.
Thank you all. I think what I got from that is that you're allowed to be selfish for the person who's dealing with these things. You're allowed to be selfish in this moment and figure out and prioritize your own needs, and then ask for support. And then to the friend, just be supportive in whatever it looks like to them, to that person, and letting them tell you what that looks like. Awesome. All right. I do kind of want to do a quick upswing and just kind of move in a different direction, and just wanting to, in the spirit of Pride Month, just letting people know that, or letting at least LGBTQ community and folks know that you deserve a life worth living, and your quality of life is super important. And so I want to ask each of you what you all do for your wellness.
Us?
Yeah. Shake things up a bit. You talked about having fun, Henry. What do you do?
Have fun.
Make that life worth living. I love it.
I guess for me, people are, I'm extroverted. So, for me, like being around people is so important. Conversation, good people, though, the people that make me feel, loved and supported and nurtured, and that just add a lot of love and life to my life, but besides that, exercise, just taking time for myself, reflection, meditation, especially during COVID, that was a big thing, and just, taking time. Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I'm more of an introvert. And I live in the foothills. So got a few acres up here, and I spent a lot of time repairing fences and chicken coops and trimming trees and repairing engines and doing tractor work and a lot of outside work. And when I can't be outside, then I'm inside, usually playing music, guitars or wind instruments or piano or whatever, and playing with my animals and just enjoying this. It's very tranquil up here, so I just love it.
Very nice. It sounds nice.
Yeah, I'm kind of, well, I think I'm more introverted, but I do have some extroverted qualities. But we just finished our last kickball game of the season last night. So there's one thing I do, I play kickball. And, I'm a very athletic person. So a lot of what I do is, run, workout, you name it. So anything that keeps me physical, I love. And I'm very fortunate that I have, a great family. I've got stepkids and I have grandchildren, which is a new thing for me. But it's been wonderful. And so, I spend a lot of time with family and friends and, and when I need my brain break, I'm out there running. So it's just, doing what you feel is right for yourself. And having fun, because we all gotta have fun. You gotta find something to laugh about every day if you can. So
Absolutely. I don't know why I felt personally attacked when you said that you were active, but I felt it. Like, okay, I'm gonna get to the gym. Your goals, basically, goals. I aspire to be more active. How have you all been protecting your peace throughout all of the pandemic? I know we talked a little bit about someone having a TV on in the background and just getting informed.
yeah.
And it's a struggle, right? Just I want to be informed, but there's just like so many things going on.
There's a lot going on. And I'm, I like to be informed. Anybody who knows me, I'm kind of politically active as well. And that's important for me because I like to know what's happening. But you're right, too much is too much sometimes. And so, you just sometimes have to turn it off. And like I said, for me, sometimes I just put the earbuds in and just hit the road and just have that downtime. Because that's, especially with the pandemic, the stress of not being able to see people, not knowing, living in the unknown. One is, and you're stifled, not being able to do the things so it kind of took some retooling. I feel a lot better now that things are, vaccinated, things are opening up a bit more, but yeah, there's still some concerns out there and just try to remain hopeful and, and when you need it, reach out to people to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Because this pandemic is a really shared experience, whatever side you're on, everybody has stress around it.
Definitely.
I think
Go ahead. The evening news type stuff, the local news, I'll turn it on to watch the weather, which doesn't generally tell the weather up where I'm at. So it's not that critical for me. And so I generally avoid that. I tend to watch comedy shows. And that's if I watch TV at all, if I have time. Right. Other than I don't talk politics as it takes away my peace. So I just ignore it. I'm not going there.
I have a bit of a struggle with that as well. I know I decided a while back to stop like engaging in news and stuff. And my partner, he's like super into like the news and he's always reading stuff like all day. And so if something important happens, he always tells me. So like he's like my news, the unofficial, But for me, it was very distressing for like 4 years primarily. And I just kind of got like really burned out over it. It was like every day, it was like something like a notification on my phone. And I was like, what would I tell somebody else who was like going through this? And I was like, probably to like take a break. And it felt great. And so now I've been like mostly on a break or like, long-term break. Yeah.
Right.
And it feels good. But there are times where I hear things that I don't know and I feel very misinformed. And I don't like that feeling. But I also prefer not to be stressed. So yeah. But I'm kind of in between Steve and Lisa. I'm trying to find that balance, because
Yeah.
at least I love politics and I love being informed as well, but it's hard right now.
Yeah. And I think it absolutely is a balance. And that's why we're having this conversation right now, is because people don't always get into therapy, right? But there are things that you can do every day to promote your wellness and your holistic health, right?
Yeah.
I think that, and as I'm not an athletic person, I very much am like the foodie. I try to go to the gym because I know that it can be something that it's literally like impacts your neurotransmitters and can be so good for your mental health. Just getting up and moving. But I mean, I'm kind of lazy, but
it's just, it doesn't, it's just finding something that activates that for you. I mean, we all have our things that speak to us. And I think you just got to listen to that. My athleticism, I started playing soccer at 5. It's just something that I do. And it's a big relief thing for me. I mean, yeah, it's a positive thing for your body, but it's more of this.
yeah.
And just being able to plug in and tune out, if that makes sense, when I'm on the road. So.
And we have to explore sometimes what it is that we can get that from, I know for me, I used to love to run, and that was I called it my therapy. But then with injuries and running and stuff, just normally long-term, So now I have my like Peloton, that's like, my new thing. And I try like Pilates, and that was awesome too, So less impact stuff. But, sometimes you have to kind of figure out where it is that you can have that outlet and it feels right, because running's not for everybody, nor is like, I don't know, mixed martial arts might be your thing,
But cooking is a great thing too. I mean, I'm married to my wife, has a great cook. And I think that's part of also her stress relief, is going in the kitchen and mixing it up. So, that's where people find relief. That's it. So.
Oh yeah, I in no way was putting down the food part. I was just saying, like, trying to maybe find a different activity.
Oh no.
Good, yeah.
No, but I mean,
yeah.
Art, writing, it's exercising this, right? Yeah. So.
Well, I volunteer for tribute. If your wife ever wants to like sample some food, I'm fully there.
All right.
Also, like the kickball sounds like not like exercise to me. That sounds fun. Like you're absolutely right. It's just like figuring out.
We came in dead last this season.
Oh.
In one game. And last someone asked me, is it true? Are you the team that didn't win a game? And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But we stayed consistent, and we were mindful that we were playing with a kickball, a big ball this way. So it's meant to be fun.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. You were the winners at having fun. There you go. Reframe. Awesome. Well, I do want to ask, is there any kind of support? I know, Henry, you had expressed we need to have more fun events. I know that tomorrow is the Illuminate Pride event that is being hosted by the Fresno EOC, LGBTQ community. And then we also have the Fresno Reels Pride, right?
Real Pride is hosting a screening of Rocky Horror Picture Show in the Tower tomorrow night.
What time does that one start?
Oh my gosh, I think it was 8. 7.
Okay. Perfect. So there are a couple of events that can be something that we can try out to promote your wellness and have that life worth living. I think it's super important to practice self-care every single day. Do something. Sometimes we have these things called opposite action where people are they don't feel like doing anything fun. It seems like a chore. Do it anyways. Again, it's the purpose is to preserve your well-being and to promote your mental health. But I do want to give you all one last chance to just kind of mention any resources, put any shout outs, how people can reach you. say anything about your organization if you want.
I guess I'll start. My practice is called Safe and Affirmative Counseling. We serve, I guess we provide outpatient mental health services, both in person and via telehealth, kind of still integrating into in person little by little. Our office is in Northeast Fresno. We work with adolescents, adults, older adults, tweens, sometimes kids, depending on the need. There's 8 of us, and yeah, we're very passionate about working with the LGBT community. Most of our clients are part of the community, and we do have a support group for parents, parents and guardians of gender diverse, so transgender, non-binary youth are welcome to attend. It's once a month. It's every first Wednesday of the month, starting in July. We used to have different days before. We're just changing the frequency of the meetings and the day. And yeah, any parents that want to come join are more than welcome. And yeah, that's it for now.
Well, I work for County of Fresno, Department of Behavioral Health. I happen to be on the children's services, and we serve anybody up to age 18, but we also have transitional age youth, which works up till age 22-ish. And then there's the adult services. I don't know what their criteria are, but at the very least, we can get you referred for services if you're looking for adult services. But the children's, we take all ages, and whether it's LGBTQ plus, families, whatever. And you're welcome to call the main number, the 559-600-8918, and request services. They're more than willing to help you. And we do have therapists that do specialize in all areas of the LGBTQ. So just give a holler and we'll be willing to answer any questions you've got.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I'll just put a plug out to explore becoming a CASA. I'm, like I said, a CASA for Fresno Madera counties. And you can reach out to me. It's Lisa Anderson at CASA fresnomadera.org. But yeah, just do some research on it. And we need CASAs because we've got so many kids in the queue who need just extra special attention. And especially in the LGBTQ community, that's a really, explicit need. So if you find yourself with an open heart and an open mind, join and look into becoming a CASA.
What exactly does a CASA do?
So we're a court-appointed special advocate. So we take in the highest need of kids out there in foster care. And so they get to be one-on-one with us. So, in my case, in other people's cases, you get to take on, go over with their education and, housing. And, a lot of it actually really comes down to being a mentor and being their advocate. Like I said, you go to court and you're there for your kid. And so it comes with a lot of responsibility, but it is very rewarding. And to guide, because, these kids in the system, you talk about a very complex system, the foster care system, and especially for LGBTQ youth who maybe get placed in a home that isn't very friendly to them and does more harm. And so having that outreach to somebody in the community or someone who's an ally can be life-saving. And like I said, just showing up to court and calling your kid by what they want to be called and correcting folks around them, does a lot for your kid.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for explaining that. I had heard the term and I assumed I knew what it meant. I worked with CASA people in the past, but never fully understood. My experience with CASA workers is just like they do everything. Like they're very knowledgeable on just like how to meet the needs of the people that they're serving. So,
and we are court appointed, so we are sworn in by the court. So we have some rights as well as a CASA. So
It's awesome.
yeah.
Well, I want to thank each of you for coming today and just being yourselves. This has been super helpful and super informative. I appreciate all of the knowledge and experience that you've been willing to share today.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. I do want to encourage our audience to continue to join these panel discussions that we have that are focused on promoting equity. We want to thank our panelists for coming today. We hope to hear from you again soon in the future, just in the ways that we can promote equity within our behavioral health systems. We do have a lot of resources on that dbhequity.org website. I do want to encourage people who are interested in learning more about how to meet the needs of the LGBT community to check out the Out for Mental Health website. There are a ton of resources there. There are a ton of research studies. There's a lot of data on that website that you can use to discuss equity and the inequities that exist within different systems, particularly in mental health. We also want to put out, there's the access line that we have within the county. We also have a suicide prevention line, and those are all on the website. We also have the Trevor Project as a resource that is specific to the LGBT community. Those are all resources available to you. And then we also have I don't know that we have them on the website, but I know that we are working on getting some book resources for people who are interested in learning more about meeting the needs of the communities that we serve. And so check out the dbhequity.org website for more information. And then we will also include some information specific to our panelists today so that you can reach out to them. All right. So again, thank you all so much for attending. I hope that you all protect your peace and enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was nice seeing you all.